Look at that.
I posted this comment on another creator.
She says, at 26, I was $230,000 in debt for a law degree. 5 years later, $180K paid, but $90,000 left. Should be debt free in 18 months. It's hard, but deciding to take action and pay them off and potentially is worth it.
Creator's video about her plans to pay off her debt, just because I so much related to her anxiety about looking at all these big numbers on a piece of paper and thinking, how in the world am I going to tackle this? So I had a lot of people responding to my comment, just asking me questions about how I had managed to pay off a good chunk of my debt thus far. So I thought I would make a few videos just to, see if my experience and the things that I've learned would be able to help anybody else, because I know how horrible it can feel. So in this first video, I'm just going to lay out all of my debts.
Here we go.
And then in subsequent videos, I will talk about how much I've paid back thus far, how I've been able to maximize the amount that I've paid back, how I've refinanced my loans, and what my plans are going forward. So the majority of my debt comes from student loans.
Of course it does.
So I had to do 4 years of undergrad and then 3 years of law school to become an attorney. So for undergrad, I borrowed from the federal government $20,500. Now those loans ranged from 3.86% interest to 6.8%. The rest of undergrad, my parents helped me with. I paid some myself, and then I had scholarships. Now law school is really where the majority of my loans come from.
$166,000 plus another $10,000. Look at that.
Off my debt, $6,000, $215 a month car note. Hey, yeah. AJ, I gotta get going, man. Take care.
All right, buddy.
Peace, brother, man.
Take it easy. Yeah, guys. The only debt I have is my mortgage. That's it. These dunderheads here, man. Yikes.
So for law school, I borrowed $166,174 from the federal government, and those ranged from 5.31 to 7.6% interest. And then my grandma also lent me $10,000 at 2% interest. So in total, I borrowed $196,674. Now, in the 7 years that I went through school, and then for about a year afterwards, I took and passed to the bar and got a job. My loans were just accruing interest. So in total, it was almost $35,000 worth of interest from when I first started taking out loans until I started paying them back.
$34,000 on interest on top of that. Cooked.
So in total, my student loans at the time of starting to pay them back were at $231,609.77. Now, my only other debt is my car loan. So I took that out at $17,896.67, and that was at 0.9% interest. So in total, my debt came to $249,506.44. So if you come back for the next video, I'll talk about how much I've paid thus far, refinancing my loans, and what my plans are going forward.
Just a reminder, you guys, interest is the price you pay to use other people's money.
Yep. That's true.
Never get that over your head.
Yep. Yeah. Toss always says, what a balloon head. Hey, guys, let's play a game of How Cooked Is She? Guys, rate her on the cooked-o-meter.
It's over 9,000!
Look at that. Look at that, guys.
Being as deep in debt as she was, and she took another $17,000 to buy a freaking car. That is just stupid.
Yeah, it's dumb, dude. She could have got a freaking 2003 Mercury Grand Marquis and drove it till the wheels fell off. Got a freaking 98 Buick Park Avenue. Got a freaking 2001 Avalon. Guys, we always talk about the freaking point A to point B's. Get a freaking 2013 Prius. You know what I'm saying? A Corolla, a Camry, $5,000-6,000, and you're ready to rock.
Okay, so where I'd left off in the last video was that a few years ago, I was almost $250,000 in debt. The majority of that came from my student loans, which were over $230,000. And then the remainder was from my car note, which was a little less than $18,000. So the student loan interest was really killing me. The majority of that $230,000 were at interest rates between 6.5% and 7.5% interest. So every month I was accruing like $1,300 to $1,400 in interest.
See that?
And that amount is just not sustainable. So what I did was I consolidated my federal student loan.
That means, guys, that if she was doing income-based payments, that would have been her minimum payment. It was like $1,300, $1,400 a month. At least. Insane.
Into one big loan. And then I refinanced it with a private lender at 4.25% interest instead.
Here's the thing, guys. When she did that, she made it so that the cough time didn't work for her, right? So she had to keep paying down the whole time, which is fine. But guys, I know a couple people where when Orange Man put student loans on hold during the cough, they used that interest-free time to and no payment time, just pay off everything, you know? So
now, one of my student loans was at 3.86% interest, loan for about $5,700. So I left that one with the federal government just because it was at a lower interest rate than the ones that I consolidated. Now, I did still have the one loan from my grandmother for $10,000 that was at 2% interest. And then my car note, which was about $18,000, and that was at 0.9% interest. So I knew I wouldn't get better rates on those ones, so I left those where they were. So after consolidating most of my federal student loans and refinancing them to 4.25% interest, I went from paying about $1,300, $1,400 a month in interest on those down to about $750 a month in interest, which is still a lot, but it's way more manageable. Refinancing them to 4.25% interest, I went from paying about $1,300, $1,400 a month in interest on those down to about $750 a month in interest.
Look at that, guys.
It's still a lot, but it's way more manageable. So at the time, I didn't know anything about any of the debt repayment strategies that you see a lot online now, like the avalanche method or the snowball method. I just looked at my debts, and most of them were at much lower of an interest rate, and those ones were all much smaller loan amounts. So I really started attacking the biggest loan at the highest interest rate just because that made the most sense to me. Like I said, that one was accruing $750 in interest a month, whereas the other ones were accruing all less than $20 in interest a month. So I just really didn't see the need to pay those off quickly, but whatever method works the best for you, definitely stick with that. So consolidating and refinancing helped me a ton, but I think the second most helpful thing that I did was that I never really changed my lifestyle since being a law student, because I looked at the salary that I was getting as that it was not really my money. It belonged to past me that had borrowed it. So whenever I was, getting decent sized paychecks, I would act kind of like I wasn't, because that money was already promised to my student loans. That's how I thought about it in my head. So in the beginning of my career, I was making about $70,000 salary.
See?
And then I would get...
There you go, guys. Guys, what did I just say? She's making $70,000 a year as an attorney with $240,000 in student loan debt. You absolute dunderhead. Look at that, guys. Look at that.
You stupid woman.
Bonuses that were like commissions, essentially, off of the settlements that I was bringing in a month. So with that, I would live off of the $70,000 base that I was getting. And then some of that would go towards my loans. But any bonuses I got went pretty much exclusively to my loans, because, again, I looked at that as like paying my past self back. Now, I've tried to keep that mindset of living off of that about $70K in my mind. So now, even though I'm making more than double that, I still live basically the same as I used to. So I drive a pretty modest car. I just have a Honda Civic. I really don't spend too lavishly. I still have fun and travel and do things, but I just really try to live well under my means. When I switched from that job where I was making a lower base salary but was making commissions, to a job where I wasn't really making bonuses, but just, straight salary. I really got more into budgeting and really tracking my expenses and just seeing like where I'm
until she meets a guy, right, guys? And then it's going to be all Poindexter's job to help her pay the rest of this off.
Spending too much money, so that I can really maximize the amount that's going out towards my student loans every month. And again, that's just another conscious thing that I did to make sure that I could pay my student loans as quickly as possible and really maximize that amount that I was sending out. Okay, so in the next video, I'm going to break down how much I've paid each year that I've been paying my student loans back and go through the totals.
Here we go, guys.
Just an observation.
Mm-hmm.
Just an observation. She's actually one of the more level-headed that I've seen on a lot of these videos, because she did say she was taking her bonuses and trying to kill that debt, whereas all the others would say, oh, I got a bonus, and so we did a girls' weekend in Vegas, and I blew all my money on all this other stuff, and woe is me, I'm still up to my butt in debt. So
yeah,
I'll have to give her credit for that. But anyway.
Yeah. Let's go to the next one, guys.
In this video, I'm just going to talk through how I decided to consolidate and refinance my federal student loans with a private lender. So I had over $200,000 of student loan debt with the federal government.
Look at that, guys. That's a house in some states,
It was in 13 different loans that ranged from 3.86% interest to 7.6% interest. But most of the loans were over 6% to 7% interest. I researched a lot to weigh the pros and cons, and the pros of consolidating, even if that's through the federal government or a private lender, is that all your loans are in one place, so you have one loan to keep track of. It's just one interest rate, one payment. And then with refinancing the loans, you have a lower interest rate, which means that more of your payments are actually going towards the principal, so you're able to pay off the loans quicker and save yourself money in the long run. The cons of no longer having loans with the federal government means that you have a lot less payment options and programs to take advantage of. So public student loan forgiveness, PSLF, is a big one for a lot of people. That's where if you work for the government or a nonprofit organization for 10 years, you make smaller payments on your loans during that period. And then at the end of the 10 years, the remaining balance of your loans are forgiven. It sounds simple in theory, but I've heard that there were a lot of people who made payments that then for some reason didn't count for technicalities, and just a lot of hoops to jump through with that one. Also, I never really wanted to work for the government or a nonprofit, so that one didn't really matter as much to me.
Now, she better have a really good salary to justify this, because she can make 70K per year working for the feds, and only do her 8 and skate. You know what I'm saying? So
another thing is that private lenders are not going to forgive student loans like the federal government may. So a couple years ago, President Biden proposed forgiving $20,000 of federal student loan debt.
Yeah, and anyone who thought that would happen,
You've been had. You've been took. You've been hoodwinked. Bamboozled. Led astray. Run amok.
come on.
Which sounds great, but one, this only applies to undergraduate loans, and the majority of my loans are from law school. And the Supreme Court ended up striking that plan down. So my understanding is that it would have to go through Congress, any type of loan forgiveness. And I just don't foresee that happening. So I didn't put a lot of stock in that. Another thing is you wouldn't have access to income-driven student loan repayments. So on these programs like the SAVE program or the Pay-As-You-Earn program, the government takes your taxable income. They subtract out the poverty limit that applies to how many people are in your household. And then they take that number, and a percentage of that number would be your payments every month. So this is a really nice safety net to have if something happens where like you lose your job or, you're on maternity leave and can't pay for a certain period of time. But I think a huge problem is that people do these repayment programs immediately and are paying almost nothing towards their student loan debt, and they get really used to paying almost nothing towards their student loan debt. so that when you actually do start making money, you still don't really want to pay anything. And you're not used to having to sacrifice and take a big chunk of your paycheck and put it away towards your loan.
Us guys are, because we want to pay off loans as quickly as possible, right, guys? Guys, there's nothing more annoying than being in debt. Guys, and Cord can chime in here. Guys, the only debt that you should be in is a mortgage. That's it.
Yeah, and
that's
don't do a 30-year mortgage.
Yeah, that's the only acceptable debt there is. You know what I mean?
And I'm gonna speak from experience. I paid my mortgage off last year, and it is a freeing feeling I cannot describe.
But there's like no reason why you should. I mean, guys, even if you need a car, guys, there's cars that you can get for like $6,000-7,000 that are just fine. You know, it doesn't make any sense why people have. And what's even crazier to me is people that have 80 and 90 grand in credit card debt, not a car, you know, in consumer debt. Insane.
So, for example, if you borrowed $100,000 at a 6% interest rate and you had to pay that back over 10 years, your payments would be $1,111 per month. But on an income-driven repayment plan, your payment amount might actually be calculated at, say, $500 a month, which seems great because it's a lower payment amount, right? But if you pay that $500 a month,
you're only paying the interest
for 5 years. You'll pay $30,000, and at the end of that 5 years, your student loan account balance
hasn't moved.
$99,420. So less than $600 even touched that loan. So you paid 30 grand and it did almost nothing. Say it was actually calculated at $400 a month and you paid that every month for 5 years. So you've paid $24,000 over that time period. And then your loan amount would actually get bigger to $106,000 at the end of that 5 years.
Crazy, right, guys?
Say you didn't have a job and you paid nothing for 5 years. Your loan amount would be $134,000 at the end of that time. Now, I can appreciate that there are people who just cannot afford student loan payments, but I think that the majority of people really could afford if they kind of cut back their lifestyle and really just took this as a period where you're going to struggle a little bit and it's not going to be fun and cushy.
Yeah, right. You think that these modern women actually understand that they're going to have to struggle for a little bit and not buy handbags and go to brunch and buy $30 drinks in Manhattan? Or here, that they'll have to get a roommate. These chicks think the very idea of even having a roommate, to even suggest such a thing.
How dare you?
Come on, man.
But the goal is to get the loans paid off as quickly as possible so that you have freedom going forward. Another potential con is the difference in forbearance and deferment of your loans between having them with the federal government versus a private lender. So that means either delaying payments or making smaller or no payments for a period of time without actually defaulting on the loan. The federal government seems to have a lot more leeway with this and grant those exceptions for a lot more people, whereas private student loan lenders are definitely not as willing to do that. They may work with you some, but how much and for how long? And if you default on your loans, that can mean huge impacts for your credit. You can also be sued, or your wages can actually be garnished. So they'll take a portion of your paycheck before you even ever get it. Without all those safety nets that the federal government provides, I really had to make sure that if I was going to refinance my loan, it had to be at an amount that was reasonable that I could actually afford every month so I wouldn't default on the loans.
Gee, you mean she had to be smart and act like a guy would? How about that?
So I was doing some research while I was waiting for my bar results, so I didn't have a job yet. So I first looked at what was the government salary for somebody of my education. So for me, that as a lawyer, that was a GS-11, which at the time was making about $70,000 per year, just base, no locality pay or anything. So I took that $70,000, subtracted out taxes and insurance stuff. I just kind of asked my friends who had jobs like, hey, how much are you paying for insurance, for dental and medical vision every month? So I kind of knew, somewhere around what I could actually expect. And from that, I got a take-home pay amount. And from there, I subtracted out reasonable living expenses, which for me meant living with roommates, budgeting groceries, not really going out. But I was already kind of living that way in law school, so it wasn't like a huge adjustment.
So in other words, she's asking chicks to not live like chicks, right? That's
what I said. She's pretty level-headed and has a good plan.
Yeah. Here you go.
A few years ago, I was just under $250,000 in debt, and to date, I have paid $200,020.47 towards that debt. My debt includes $231,609.77 in student loans.
Look at that, guys.
And $17,896.67 for a car loan. So I'm going to go through each year that I've been paying back my debt and talk about how much money I was making at the time and how much I was actually able to put towards my debt. So just as a little bit of background, I am an attorney, which means I did 4 years of undergrad, and then right after I did 3 years of law school. After law school, it takes some time to take the bar and then get a job. So I started paying my loans back about a year after I graduated and passed the bar. So the period that I'm talking about this repayment with is mainly over the last 4.5 years. During that time, I have lived on my own, paying my own bills. The only exception was for the first 6 months of this. I lived with my parents, which was a really weird story that I won't get into, but that was the only time where I wasn't paying rent. And I've been in a 1-bedroom apartment by myself since. So first. Now,
guys, once again, I'd have a roommate. Seriously, guys, I don't know why chicks have this weird thing where they just, well, yeah. Actually, I do know why they want to live alone. It's because they hate each other, right? Right, guys? It's because women have no respect for each other. They hate each other, and they treat each other like trash, right? See, guys, you could have a roommate as a guy that you barely know, but you can come to an understanding. You mess with my stuff, and I'll beat the hell out of you. You know, and vice versa. You know what I'm saying? You gotta have respect. Chicks don't like each other, and they don't respect each other.
Before I even finished school, I paid $3,998.63 towards my student loans. The majority of this was in undergrad, where I just tried to pay off the interest of my loans. I only took out about $20,500 for undergrad because I had scholarships and my parents helped me some. So the majority of my debt came in through law school. And if you've seen some of my other videos, you know that since I've been out of law school, I've really tried to maintain that low cost of living lifestyle that I had when I was a student and not really adjust up my lifestyle. So I pay as much as possible towards my student loans and get them paid off as quickly as I can.
Korg, what percentage of late 20s, early 30s women do you think would think like this woman?
Oh, God, less than 0.5%.
Yeah, I think so. Equilibrium, what's up, dude?
So in the first year, I paid $41,041.20 towards my debt. About $2,500 of that went to my car, and about $38,000 of that went towards my student loans. So for 6 months of this year, I was living with my parents and I was not paying rent, but that's the only time where that's happened for me. And I bought my car a couple months in as well. So at that job, I started making $70,000 salary, and I would get commissions on top of that. Now, I busted my butt at that job, and within 6 months, I got a raise to $95,000, where I was still making bonuses. So I looked at my taxable income for these years, and these payments don't align perfectly with the tax year because I'm a little bit off, but close enough. My taxable income was about $114,000. Now, that's not what I actually took home. That's just what I was taxed on. Okay, and then in the second year, I paid $44,697.03.
Can you imagine any woman taking $41,000 out of her income and paying it towards loans? Guys, I can't think of a single woman who would do this other than this person, right? They would have blown this all on handbags, on brunch, you know, going to friggin' Dubai to let Sheikh Mahmoud drop a deuce on him. You know what I'm saying?
Towards debt. That included $3,661.80 towards my car and $41,035.23 towards my student loans. This year, I was making a salary between $95,000 to like $105,000, and I did have bonuses in that. And then at the end of this year, I transitioned to a job where I was just making salary of $115,000. So when I transitioned over to that job where
you guys, an attorney, I mean, 115K is not that great. You know, guys, there are blue collar guys that drive trucks, that do all types of stuff, that don't have this debt, that are making more than this chick, that are younger. You know, there are guys who bust their butts being electricians, guys that are by the time that they're her age, that are 29, 30, they're like master mechanics making 130, 140,000 a year. Why would anyone want to be an attorney? Why?
Just making a salary and not making commissions like I used to be. I had a period of time where I was like, all right, I need to kind of bank some money and put it away just in case something happens, because I'm not just getting these big cash drops like I'm used to. So in year 3, I paid a little bit less than I was used to paying. So I paid $39,428.23 towards debt. So again, $3,661.80 of that was towards my car, and then
Steve, yeah, she should have stayed with the bonus option. Yeah, but guys, once again, guys,
Just like a woman.
right, guys? She basically took a pay cut. Absolutely. Yeah, laughing man said it best. She's gonna find some sucker, right? Yep.
$35,766.43 was towards my student loans. So in this year, I was making between $115,000 and $130,000 salary, and it looks like my taxable income was $128,000. I also moved in this year to a different city, and I was having to pay double rent for 2 months. So that kind of impeded me a little. Okay, now in year 4, I paid $45,712.92 towards debt. Again, $3,661.80 of that was towards my car, and then $42,051.12 was towards my student loans. My salary range.
Another thing to think about, guys, if a guy is trying to do this, guys, put a 1 if you agree. If a guy is trying to do this, he cannot date, right, guys? He can't have a girlfriend. He can't date. He can't have any romantic interest, because she's going to be like, why you spend all your money on your student loans? Right? You're broke all the time. Why don't we go out to eat? You know
what else they'll say? You need to get a higher paying job.
Yep. Facts. Yep.
$132,000 and $145,000. And then my taxable income was $137,000. Now it's currently year 5 for me, so I am halfway through it. I just made my student loan payments for April. So with that, in the last 6 months, I have paid $25,152.46 towards debt. $1,830.90 of that have gone towards my car, and then $23,321.56 have gone towards my student loans. So altogether, that is $200,020.47 paid, and my current payoff amount for all of my student loans and my car is $83,380.86.
So in like 2,
now that amount is broken down into 3 student loans,
a year and a half,
put here on the screen,
or 2 years
as the first 3, and then my car payment is the last one. Now my goal is to pay off my largest student loan as soon as possible. It is the largest loan, and it has the highest interest percentage of all my loans, so that one's the one that keeps me up the most at night. Now the second loan is the one that I still have with the federal government, because it was at a lower interest rate than my refinance percentage was. So technically, this is still in an income-driven repayment plan, which means I don't actually have to start making payments on it until October of 2026. Now, I have been paying about $20 a month towards this loan just to cover the interest, and then it's just a few bucks towards the principal. Now, the reason is because once I pay off the other loans, this will be the only one that is still on my credit report, and I don't want my credit to completely tank. And I've had this loan since 2013, so it's a long account length for me, which also helps my credit. So my plan with this one is to just pay like as little as possible, and once the payments come back in, I will just pay the minimum, which should be about $50 a month, until I get a house, and then I will just pay this off in full, because at that point my credit score won't matter. but I want to keep it good until then, if that makes sense.
Imagine, guys, all of this money basically just. I mean, yes, she's a lawyer, so her earnings pretty good, but she's obviously showed by getting off the bonus system that she's not really making moves to make a lot of money, right? She wants kind of a salary, kind of she should have stayed on that bonus thing because then she'd probably be making more. So.
All right. And then so for the last two loans, I pay the minimum amounts every month, and paying those minimums, I will pay both of them off in February of 26. So once those two are paid off, I pay about $500 combined towards both of them. So that $500 will shift over towards my first loan. That's for $73,000. And my goal with that one is to keep paying $4,000 a month towards it like I have been until I add in that extra $500 a month. So if I keep doing that, I should have that loan paid off in October of 2026. So in October of 2026, I would have paid off loans number 1, 3, and 4. I will still have the second one that's kicking around. And I already explained that my plan is to pay about $50 a month towards that until I get a house. And then I would just pay it off completely because at that point, my credit wouldn't really matter anymore. So in October of 2026, that loan should be just under $5,000. It should be $4,970.46. So I would just put $5,000 into a high yield savings account that is at a higher interest rate.
Guys, cooked. Imagine that you meet this chick, because she's not a bad looking woman, right? She's not bad looking. And you guys hit it off on a date, right? And you guys start actually dating. Imagine having to sit through her as she goes through all this and has all this stress and all this BS. Equilibrium. Lenny, guys, what would you do if you met a chick who said, I'm spending, was it $43,000 a year to pay off my student loans? That I have $250,000 in debt. Absolutely insane. Here you guys.
I borrowed just under $200,000 for my education. So that included undergrad and law school. It was $198,876.01 if we're being exact. And currently I've paid that exact same amount back. $198,876.01. I really wish that meant that I was just done paying off my student loans, but unfortunately not all that money's gone straight towards principal. It's also had to cover interest that's been accrued. So about 2/3 has gone towards principal and the other third has paid back interest. So to date, it is $66,498.55.
66 grand in interest, guys. Look at that.
And something interesting, just because the amount that I've paid back is the exact same as the amount that I originally borrowed. Currently, my payoff amount is the exact same as the accrued interest. So that same $66,498.55. What's really crazy is that $27,000 of that interest accrued just while I was still in school.
Look at that.
And the majority of that really while I was in law school. When I was in,
you guys know what I'm hearing, right? You signed up for it.
Undergrad, I borrowed $20,000 in student loans, and that accrued about $2,500 in interest while I was still in undergrad. So I actually paid all of that off during college while I was serving in bartending. And then when I went straight through to law school, I borrowed an additional about $180 grand.
Jesus.
So those new loans combined with my $20,000 of student debt from undergrad accrued $24,417.54 in the 3 years that I was in law school, and then the 6-month grace period before I had to start paying back the loans. And mind you, these were government student loans with fixed interest rates between 3.8 and 7.6% interest. They weren't variable. It wasn't double-digit interest rates. Now, it took me about another year after that 6-month grace period to actually be able to start paying the loans back, just while I was passing the bar, moving states, getting a job, all that stuff. And during that time, I accrued another $9,340.30 in interest. So by the time I actually started paying them back, 8 years after I took out the first loan, they had accrued $36,294.
$36,000, guys. Look at that. Cooked.
$83 in interest. Because of the interest that I paid off in undergrad, it made a small dent. But when I actually started paying them back, I owed $231,179.28. I've been repaying the loans for 4 years and 9 months now. And during that time is where the additional $30,000 in interest has come in.
Cooked.
But I'm now accruing less than $250 a month in interest. And when I first started, I was accruing about $1,300 a month in interest. So
Cooked.
I've come a long way. So my student loan balance is down from $231,179.28 down to $66,000.
Now here's a question. Korg, Steve, Remixer, all you guys, do you guys think that after she does all this work to pay off her student loans, that she's going to support if the next president decides to try and pay off student loans? What do you think, Korg?
I don't know.
Because my part of me says yes, because she's a woman, but at the same time, guys, she is grinding and paying this off and working her butt off. So maybe she won't. Maybe she should say, "Look, why can't everyone else sacrifice like I did?"
Yeah, my only criticism is she's trying to attack the largest debt first when I would have hit the smaller debts.
Yeah.
Because then you roll it uphill.
Yeah. Yep. Me too.
Everybody's always fixated on the interest rate, which is really, really, I think is ridiculous. Because once you start rolling your other payments into the bigger debts as you're making progress, you're going to get both that boost of, I slayed one dragon and now I can go after the bigger one, and you've got a bigger gun to go after that dragon.
Yep, that's true. Yep.
$498.55. And my goal is to get them completely paid off within the next about 14 months. So follow along.
Cooked, guys. She's cooked.